association with death. Kemmler's stay was granted by Judge Edwin Day, who appointed lawyer Tracy C. Becker to conduct the hearings, which would explore Cochrane's claims. The hearings began on July 9th, and Cochrane was allowed to present his case first. The main thrust of his argument was that electricity was unpredictable. Among his witnesses were men who had taken shocks of huge voltages and lived to tell the tale. Other witnesses had conducted animal experiments in which some subjects lived through the jolts that should have killed them. The key to the argument was resistance, the ability of a substance or thing to impede the flow of electrical current. Resistance, Cochrane claimed, differed greatly from person to person, and there was no reliable way to tell if a man would be killed instantly or would suffer through ever-increasing voltages until he expired. The state's case was argued by Deputy Attorney General William Post. Resistance, the state's witnesses claimed, would become irrelevant at such voltages as would be used in the electric chair. As long as the electrodes maintained good contact with the condemned man's skin, they said, death would be instantaneous and painless. The state's star witness testified on July 23rd. Thomas Edison strongly disagreed with Cochrane's witnesses, calling their arguments nonsense. As long as sufficient voltages were used, the electric chair would work quickly and humanely, he claimed. He was careful to point out that those voltages should be delivered in alternating current, and mentioned Westinghouse generators by name. Becker submitted results from the hearings to Judge Day on September 17th. On the same day, both sides presented their closing arguments. On October 9th, Judge Day ruled in favor of the state. Kemmler was to be executed as planned. Cochrane appealed the decision with the State Court of Appeals, which would hear the case on February 25, 1890. Meanwhile, William Kemmler languished at Auburn Prison, and Harold Brown had already conducted preliminary tests on the electric chair he had assembled at 3 New York prisons. The State Court of Appeals decided quickly. It found no merit to Cochrane's arguments regarding the Eighth Amendment. Kemmler's execution would proceed. For a time it seemed as if Kemmler's life was coming quickly to a close. The electric chair at Auburn Prison stood ready. Prison inmates had finished building Kemmler's coffin, and the prison warden had alerted the witnesses who were to be present at the execution. But on May 2nd, Roger Sherman, another attorney hired by Westinghouse, arrived in Buffalo with an order bearing the signature of the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Kemmler's case was to be heard by the highest court in the country. On May 5th, the court granted another stay. They would hear the case on May 21st. Sherman argued again that to execute Kemmler by means of electricity was cruel and unusual punishment and would violate his 8th and 14th Amendment rights. Again, the state argued that electrocution was indeed humane, that much research and consideration had gone into making it so, and that the law was supported by all the governing bodies and courts of New York. On May 23rd, Chief Justice Melville Fuller delivered the court's opinion. Kemmler's appeal was denied. The court found that New York's law did not violate the Constitution and should stand. William Kemmler would be executed at Auburn Prison. Only a few details remained. Kemmler was brought back to Buffalo to be resentenced, as all his previous execution warrants were expired. His execution would now take place between August 3rd and August 6th, 1890. When the call went out for the official witnesses to report to the prison, crowds began to gather outside. Witnesses were to report on August 5th, and among them were Alfred Southwick and George Fell, there to see their idea finally realized. Kemmler was informed that he would be executed at 6 a.m. August 6th. Though he paced and seemed nervous, he did not lose control. Upon waking on the 6th, he dressed hurriedly in a suit that had been chosen for him. He walked resolutely to the death chamber. Asked if he had anything to say, he stated, "Well, gentlemen, I wish everyone good luck in this world. And I think I'm going to a good place, and the papers have been saying a lot of stuff that isn't so." The warden's hand shook as he fastened the straps that would secure Kemmler to the chair. Kemmler chided him. "My God, warden, can't you keep cool? Take your time. Don't be in a hurry." An electrode, in the form of a metal cap containing a sponge, was attached to his head. Another electrode was attached to his spine, so as to provide a clear path through the body for the current. The electrodes were moistened with a saline solution. In another room, The Westinghouse generator hummed as it increased power. Lamps on its control panel lighted up, indicating that it had reached 2,000 volts, which had been determined through experiments to be the optimal voltage for killing a human being. Edwin Davis then pulled the switch that allowed current to flow to the chair. Electricity coursed through William Kemmler for 17 seconds. He convulsed against the straps and turned bright red. When the current was stopped, Albert Southwick exclaimed, "There's the culmination of 10 years of work and study. We live in a higher civilization from this day." But there was a problem. Kemmler wasn't dead. Officials hurriedly gave the order to turn the current back on, but some time elapsed, as the generator had been turned off and needed time to gather power again. Meanwhile, Kemmler groaned and struggled for breath. The witnesses were horrified. When the generator again reached 2,000 volts, the current was again switched into the chair. This time it was kept on for over a minute. Smoke rose from Kemmler's head. There was a smell of burning flesh and a curious crackling sound. When the current was shut off, Kemmler was dead. Media coverage of the event ranged from sober to sensational. Some newspaper reports claimed that flames had shot from Kemmler's mouth. Some of the witnesses were troubled by what they saw and said so to reporters. Though there was a considerable public outcry, it was not enough to move legislators to repeal the electrocution law. Both Harold Brown and Thomas Edison claimed, despite evidence to the contrary, that Kemmler had been killed painlessly within the first second that the current flowed. Edison suggested, however, that future executions should be considered with more powerful generators and a different method of applying the current. The next electrocutions took place in the spring of 1891. 4 murderers, each convicted of a different murder, were executed at Sing Sing prison. James Slocum, Harris Smiler, Shichiok Yugigo, and Joseph Wood were executed in a modified version of the system used at Auburn Prison. The generator was better able to supply steady high-voltage current, and thicker wires were used. The second electrodes were placed on the condemned man's calves rather than at their spines. These executions went more smoothly, clearing the way for acceptance of the electric chair as a widely accepted means of carrying out death sentences. Edison had won his battle against Westinghouse for the time being, but would not prevail in the long run. Direct current systems quickly fell out of favor and were replaced by alternating current, which became the national standard. Rather than proving the system superior, Edison's machinations had only served to besmirch his reputation. New York used various electric chairs for roughly 72 years. At that time, 695 people were electrocuted for capital crimes. Other states passed their own laws allowing electrocution to build their own chairs. Several of these laws were pending in bill form even as Kemmler was awaiting the outcome of his appeals. Other states took many years to abandon hanging. Some did not start electrocuting their condemned criminals until the 1950s. Some never adopted the electric chair at all. California, Arizona, and a few others instituted death by cyanide gas as their means of execution. 3 states, Delaware, New Hampshire, and Washington, offer the option of hanging to this day. In 1977, Texas began conducting executions using lethal injections of drugs, claiming that this method was more humane than the electric chair. In 1981, Oklahoma did the same. In 1983, several more states made the switch from electrocution to lethal injection. Beginning in 1979, a series of botched electrocutions focused national attention on the electric chair itself. A concern arose that it was both primitive and unreliable. The condemned were suffering needlessly, the argument went. Now that a more humane method was available, why not use it? Legislators took notice, and even more states abandoned their electric chairs for lethal injection. Death by electrocution is concluding a slow exit from its starring role in the drama of 20th century justice. Of the 85 executions that took place in the United States in the year 2000, only 5 were accomplished using the electric chair. In 1999, 3 of 98 executions made use of the chair. Only Alabama and Nebraska retained the electric chair as their only available means of execution, though bills currently in the legislatures of both states would allow for the condemned to choose a lethal injection. When these bills pass into law, the nationwide trend towards execution through lethal injection will have swept the electric chair into history, where it will probably take its place beside the guillotine as an historical curiosity.